Good evening and welcome to the Dusty Feet. We're going to have it's our special guest series tonight. Tell by the purple theme. You can't even tell. I got a shirt with a purple hue to it and you can't even tell. No disappointing. Anyways, the gentleman that we're going to have tonight in a special and different, unique way is none other than my father, John Wern. And I've been wanting to have him on here a number of times, and we'll work it out. We'll get some FaceTime because there's some good stuff that left to share. But you're going to get a chance to hear him share something very special and very personal, and there's more to talk about on top of that. So let's remember, don't forget, in the description below are links to all the audio, video, and source documents that we use here on the Dusty Feet. We want to make sure that any material we use here is properly credited to those folks who work so hard to bring it to us. Without their efforts, the learning we do here does not happen. So be sure to click and subscribe. And as always on the Dusty Feet, this is a place where we can safely explore the endless ways of God, interconnection of His creation, where belief understandings may be challenged, divine misunderstandings may exist, and traditional teachings might falter as we pursue connection, context, and community with God and each other here in an environment of grace and love. So here we go with some special guests on the Dusty Feet. Okay, so this is Life Bridge Church in Savannah, Georgia, and this is where my dad and mom attend. No, my dad attends. Anyways, and they go, or he goes there. And there's a time, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, there's a time during the summer, about 8 weeks, where the pastor brings in guest speakers, both inside and outside the church, to speak. And my dad was asked to share his story. And I want you to hear it. This was Father's Day weekend. And you're going to see a side that's important because this is actually a part of me. It's an interesting way we look at it when we look at our history and we look back and we see how somebody got to somewhere and the connections that go with that. And so this is part of my story. It's his story, but it's also part of mine in a way, and we'll get to share that more down the road on the way. We throw banters around like heroes and those kind of words that we banter around and do this. And I think I'm not sure that that's a proper word. I know that mentor, um, a guide, a teacher, um, and somebody who, when I was 15 years old, I couldn't even talk to. We were so at odds with each other that we literally couldn't speak to each other. So we wrote letters to each other just to communicate. And I thought, I'm smarter than this guy, da da da, whatever. And it's so stupid. It's so immature. And as I got older, my dad got bigger and bigger and bigger and wiser and wiser and wiser. And while that's all going on, his life is going on. And you're going to get to hear that. And I think it's important to share. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy the story of my dad John Wern. You're on the Dusty Feet.
Good morning. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ that struggles with fear and trust, anger and sexual integrity, and my name is John. And you say, all right, I got some homies here. All right, already I'm feeling comfortable. Thank you. Oh, happy Father's Day. I'm a father. I'm a grandfather, and I'm a great-grandfather. I got my youngest grandchild is a year, and the oldest, great-grandchild, is a year, and the oldest is 14. Have you ever, you know who Zach Williams is, the singer? Anybody? Have you heard his There Was Jesus, Dolly Parton? That's my theme song. All through my life, I can look back and I see Jesus. Even when I only use Jesus as a swear word, he was there. And in that song, there's every minute and every moment. And if you look back as you're listening to me, if you decide to stay around after I get started, if you're listening to me, think about in your own life where Jesus was there and you didn't know him or you didn't acknowledge him, but he was there. Maybe it was the DUI you didn't get. Maybe it was the thing they didn't catch you stealing. Maybe. I don't know. But I'm going to share my story. Everybody's got a story. Everybody that's sitting here has got a story. When you're as old as I am, you got a long story. But I want to start my story with a story. My oldest son is retired Air Force, and he was stationed in Scotland. And my wife and I decided to fly over there and see him and his wife. We were really going to see our granddaughters, but we told them we were coming to see him so he didn't feel left out. And while we were there, they wanted to take us over to this pottery business that they had bought some things from, and they were really liked. And so it was a small business, probably 5-6 employees. And the husband was showing us around and was showing us the racks of pottery and talking about the business and all that. And the wife was sitting over on the wheel, put the mud on the wheel, and started making something. I don't know what it was, but it looked like it was a serving platter. And she was spreading it out and making edges and all. And I said to myself, that's what it's going to be. So I looked over at the husband, was listening to him. When I turned back, she had taken it at the base and brought it up, and now it looked like a vase, like she was going to make a vase. And I thought, wow, that's cool. And so I in my head, she was making a vase. And so I was paying attention to the guy again. When I turned back, she had taken it and she pushed it down and spread it out, and now it looked like it was going to be a bowl, and she was doing decorations on it and around it. And as we were driving home back to my son's place, I thought in my head, isn't that what life is like? Life is like that. We never know what we're going to be. We start out, you're 12 years old, you're madly in love with somebody, you're going to marry him, spend the rest of your life with him, her. Next week, guess what? The vase is a different shape now. So, one of the Bible verses that I'm working on to memorize is, all you lovers of God who want to please him, come and listen, and I'll tell you what he did for me. That's Psalm 66:16. Isn't that what we like to hear? I don't like to be told what to do. I like people to draw me in and tell me what, if you're going to go to work for somebody, you like somebody telling you they work there and how much they enjoy it. I want somebody to tell me, why do I want this Jesus in my life? And they tell me, let me tell you what he did for me. My life's journey was and continues to be full of there was Jesus and potter shaping moments. And I imagine so does yours. Maybe as I share, you'll recognize some of those moments in your mind. Oh, that's why that didn't happen. That's why that did happen, because Jesus was there, watching you, loving you, guiding you. We got to pay attention, but he's there. I was born 6 days after Pearl Harbor. It was right in the middle, I guess, of World War II. Chaotic times, I'm sure. I can't imagine what my parents went through. Kind of like what we're going through now on steroids, right? It was unbelievable. I was born into a Catholic family, went to Catholic school, my sisters and I, Catholic kindergarten through 12th grade. The church, not Jesus, was the focus of at home, at the school, and at the church. So I had no understanding of who Jesus was. I didn't know that. He was the little, was about this tall, was a child about 2 years old with great robes on, globe of the world in his hand and a crown on his head. That was the Jesus that I knew, that I saw in church. One of the other Bible verse that I like, don't merely listen to the word and so be deceived. Do what it says. James 1:22. In your life, in my life, are we doing or are we just listening? School is never easy for me. I'm dyslexic and I have ADHD. As you see me moving around up here, you're going to understand why I move around so much. So I don't go nuts, standing still. But because of that, I struggled in my classes a lot. Because they didn't understand that then. So I was just a kid that didn't pay attention and he just needed an attitude adjustment. And so I experienced being bullied a little because of my size and because of my learning disabilities. But I was a jokester, so I could make a joke out of just about anything. So if things got too tough, I threw it off on somebody else, and I made a joke or was sarcastic or something, take the pressure off of me. So I guess maybe I was a bully too, in a way. I also fantasized about being a cowboy. I thought, that would help. That helped me with another view of who I was. And I lived in Ohio, but I wanted to be a cowboy. I saw them on the movies. Yes, they had movies in the 40s. Didn't have Star Wars, but they did have movies. And our next door neighbor had a TV set. The screen was about this big, and it weighed about 1,000 pounds. But it was a TV, and we went over and watched our heroes, Roy Rogers and some of the other cowboys. And they were heroes. They were badass, man. Oops, excuse me. I'm still working on some areas of my life. But they were bad to the bone. These guys were heroes. Nobody picked on them. They rode horses. I was as tall as anybody else when I got on a horse. So I figured that was a good something for me to picture myself as. When I was 10, my parents decided to move to California. All my dreams, all my fantasies were going to come true. California. That's where cowboys lived. That's where Roy lived. That's where all the famous cowboys lived. They didn't, but, you thought they did because that's where they made the movies. But after we moved there, nothing really changed. Life was the same. I was still a scared little boy. I didn't have a horse, and I had a gun, cap gun, but it didn't change. And I was very disappointed and maybe even depressed, I guess. But then when Pastor Chris talked about unforgettable moments, one of those unforgettable moments. It was summertime. I was laying on the floor in the house, and my sister came in. She goes, come here. Now, I don't know if you've got any siblings, older siblings, but a come here could mean two different things. One of them is, want to share this wonderful treat with you. The other one, you're going to be made a fool of and look ridiculous. That was neither one. My other sister was sitting on my parents' bed, and they had a shoebox with a bunch of photos in them. Photos of ladies. Nobody should look at pictures like that. Nobody should have them under their bed. But we looked at them. My sisters got up and left the room, and I was still going through them. I don't know if they ever went back, but I did. Every day. And then I graduated. I graduated to magazines. They didn't have the plethora of magazines. They didn't have internet and all the things you could get now. I cry for my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But I liked looking at that, and I can't figure out why. Now, my parents let me have the magazines. I had them in my bedroom. And they never said anything. They didn't buy them for me. I had a paper route, and so I had money, so I bought magazines. In the stores in those days, they were called girly magazines. That's what they called porn in the 50s. They called them girly magazines. And one night, my dad came into my room, and I was looking at one of the magazines. I wasn't reading the articles. And he asked me a question, smiled, and walked out of the room. And I thought, stamp of approval. He didn't say anything. I don't think that anymore, and I haven't thought that way for a long time. I feel like he left me unprotected, both my parents, by letting me keep those. They thought they were being nice, but he had a chance to sit down on the corner of that bed and talk to me. Son, women aren't really like that. The men that make those magazines, they're objectifying, they're lying to you. And but he didn't. And so I went on thinking it was okay. A few years, my parents enrolled me into Notre Dame High School. Remember, I said Catholic school my whole life. Notre Dame was well known. They had very high standards, scholastically, athletically, high standards. How do you think a kid with my issues made out in that school? I mean, I walked in to a hornet's nest, so to speak. The teachers, some of them made fun of me, yelled at me more than made fun of me. But because of that, now you're pointed out. Everybody knows you're a loser. And it was a difficult time. School was, but in those days you had two ways you were. You were either a greaser or an Ivy Leaguer, and I was a greaser. And I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I really wasn't a big problem in class, except I never had the answers. But they call that profiling today. But that's how they identified you. You're one of the bad guys. You're a troublemaker. We know by the way you dress. We don't know who you are, but we're gonna label you. When I was around 14, I decided to pursue my other fantasy. Remember what that was? Cowboy. I want to be a cowboy. So I used to hitchhike every Friday down to Burbank, California, which was right next to Griffith Park, which was hundreds of acres of open land. And they had horse stables down there. And I found one, and the two guys that ran it, they were ex-stuntmen and ex-rodeo riders, and that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a tough guy. I wanted to be a man. I wanted people to look at me and respect me, because that's what I thought you would earn by that. So I cleaned stalls every Friday, every Saturday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. I cleaned stalls, brushed down the horses, fed them. I loved it. I loved it. But the atmosphere wasn't healthy. It wasn't a good place. I experienced things and saw things that no human being should see, let alone a 14, 15-year-old boy. And one day, it was actually in the evening, one guy who stole cars all the time, but he came with a really cool car. And he said, "You guys want to go for a ride?" So we jumped in, and we were driving around the side streets, and here he comes. We're going this way. Here comes a cop car. Got about, 56, whatever it was, feet behind us, never stopped. And I said, "Pull over." And they pulled over, and I got out of the car. And why? I wasn't a good guy. I jumped in the stolen car. Why? There was Jesus. Yeah. He just said, "Get out of the car, dude. Isn't being short and dumb bad enough? You want to go to jail too? Come on." And I think that was a turning point for me to not go back there. I still hung around for another few months, but it was never the same. I never looked at the men there the same. I never looked at the future of that the same. And about that time, my parents moved to a new development in California called Granada Hills. And so it just was a good time to make a transition. It worked out. And of course, I had friends there. We were always, doing some dumb thing. So it wasn't like this, all of a sudden I saw the light. But I was out of that. I was out of that environment. And within a year or so, couple years, I was out of school. I was 18 years old. And I had a 59 Chevy. Now, I don't know if there's any car people in this group, but if you are, 59 Chevys were bad, man. They were bad. 57 Chevy was badder, and a Corvette, of course, was the tops, but a 59 was nice. And I drove around all the time, windows rolled down, radio blaring. I was the person that you hated when you didn't want to do that anymore. And then one night, ran into that unforgettable moment again. Driving down the street, coming the other way, the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen in my life, driving a green pickup truck. Now, it's not bad enough she's beautiful, but she's driving a truck. Come on. What cowboy doesn't love a good-looking woman in a truck, man? U-turn, follow her. Got to the hangout, and one of the hangouts, and she walked in, and she got out of the car, and she went from a 9.5 to a 12. I said, man, oh man, I was automatic. First lust at first sight. But I was still the same guy. Just because I had a 59 Chevy, I was still scared, insecure, this tall. Come on. What chance have you got? But I was also stubborn. So I saw her around. I saw she wasn't dating anybody. Definitely saw she wasn't dating any big guys. So I decided to ask her out. And the shock of all shocks, she said yes. And remember, I had no moral compass. We were in for the fun, both of us, looking for fun. I was 18, she was 17, still in high school. About 6 months later, we found out she was pregnant. Now what? What do you do now? So we went to our parents. Our parents laughed. They thought we were joking. They hoped we were joking. They were praying that we were joking. We weren't joking. They didn't want, who wouldn't want me as a son-in-law, right? What a catch. I made $1.67 an hour. Come on. So anyway, she is more stubborn than I was, so we ended up getting married. The families were against it, but once we got married, they were behind us. I have to say that, and I praise God for that. I wasn't a good husband. I wasn't a good father. I looked for excuses to take off at night. Kids were screaming. She was nagging me, whatever. But Ephesians 5:25 says, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." I'd never read that verse. Heck, I'd never read the Bible. But Jesus was still there. Maybe you can identify with that. Maybe you ran into that kind of scenario with whatever situation in your life. I don't know, but Jesus was there. Life went on, me working 70, 80-hour weeks, her working part-time, trying to raise our sons. But we got into, back up, John. About 6 months, 8 months after we got married, we got into car racing. And we both liked it for different reasons, but we both liked it. And we were local heroes. The driver, he was a track champion. So if you wore the 58 shirt or you had a jacket that said 58 on it, you were automatically a cool guy or a cool girl. I'd never experienced being cool before. I still wasn't cool, but that made me cool, and I liked that, and I was proud to be part of that. But on the outside of racing, I was living a life that nothing proud about that. I stole from my bosses, the place I worked for. I lied to them. I lied to my wife. I had affairs. You figure, how in the world could you do that? You're working 70, 80 hours a week, 20, 30 hours a week. I was working on the race car. But when you have no moral compass, you find time, you find the money, you find whatever. You understand? You probably know what I'm talking about. And I said, what's the problem? My paycheck comes home, the majority of it. I'm still paying the bills. Most of my free time was spent with them, my family. What free time? I didn't have free time. I only had free time when they wanted to be with me. Wanted to go to the racetrack? Then we hung out. And everybody did what I was doing. All the guys did the same thing. No moral compass. That's the way you think when you don't have a moral compass. But it left my sons and my wife unprotected. Painted a poor picture of what a husband and a father should be. I was repeating what I had experienced as a boy. How about you? Bring anything to mind? Or you're saying, wow, am I glad I wasn't raised in that situation? Praise God, I'm glad you weren't either. And my parents weren't bad people. Not that they were evil, but they didn't have a moral compass either. When so my mother-in-law took care of our kids when we were racing. Her husband had died a month before we got married. Because if he hadn't died the month before we got married, he probably would have killed me. So I'll see him Jack, I'll see you someday. We'll be up and I'll be in heaven. But she was brokenhearted, of course, and she turned to God. So she was going to church, and she took my kids to church with her every Sunday. Great. They're out of my hair. I can sleep in on Sunday morning, get the race car, clean it up, get bedded. So that was wonderful. There was Jesus. My oldest son comes. Hey, Dad, how come you don't go to church? I didn't tell him. I didn't sit down with him and tell him, son, I struggle with church. I struggle with the way people treated me, and I struggled. No, I told him, shut up. Don't bug me with the church stuff. But you know something? They didn't stop. He and his brother, now his brothers joined in. How come you don't go to church? And then my wife says, maybe we should try it. My wife has never been to church in her entire life. I'm not kidding you. She didn't even know who Jesus was. Why don't we try it? Well, I didn't want to try it. But sometimes I did what my wife told me to do. And it paid off. We went, and I had been raised in a Catholic church in the 50s. This was a progressive Baptist church of the 70s. And I said, oh my gosh. Very, very different. I freaked out. But in less than a month, she accepts Christ. Yeah, thank you. I'm dead now. I thought things were worse then. At least, we'd party together, but now, no. But God put a couple of men in my life. Maybe you've had that happen too. A couple of men in my life, a couple of women in your life that didn't preach to me. They lived Christ. They lived what it was. They showed me what it was like to be a husband and a father. They hung out with me and we grew. When I was 29, I surrendered to Christ. But I still struggled. And I didn't know why. I had everything the world said would make me happy. Money, success, beautiful wife, great kids, and hope for the future. But I wasn't happy. Although I had not had a physical affair in decades, I still, a magazine every now and then, maybe inappropriate conversations with clients. I left one part out, and I'm sorry. I through a series of things in our life, I ended up in barber school. And I never liked school. As I told you, I always made fun of it. But barber school was different. I liked it. I liked it a lot. And there was an instructor in there. We called him the professor. He was very progressive. And he put his arm around me one day and he said, Wern, he said, if you snap out of it and you start acting like you should, you can be something you can do something with your life. I went to school. No teacher ever said that to me. I was the loser. I was a troublemaker. This guy said I had what it took. And like I said, he was very progressive, so he put me on the cutting edge. So I graduated from school, had a great time, got a good job out of school, and 4 years later, I opened my first salon. I was living large, and we had stopped our involvement in car racing. And now I was focused on getting rich. Now I know that car racing is not in the Bible, but I think rich is. It should be. You can't be holy and rich, can't you? I mean, look at Pastor Chris. Come on. So I was living in the 80s. I had 2 salons and I was a partner in 2 other businesses. We changed churches. So we changed churches, and I felt God urging me to get to serve in some way. And I thought, oh, I'm a pretty cool guy now, so he'll pick out some nice, cool thing for me to get involved in. So I ended up in a program called Special Ministries. My sons even helped me in it, and it was a ministry to young adults with developmental disabilities. And it was great. I was with my people, developmental disabilities. We had so much fun talking about Jesus, watching how they accepted Christ. They lived out. It was very, very different than us. And it had nothing to do with power or money or anything else. It was just who Jesus was. And God never gave up on me. I bought a van, an accessible van, so I could take my friends around. And we had, like I say, we went all kinds of places. We went to the fair one time, county fair, and we got, let people with disabilities get front in line, right? So we went up there. He says, no, you can't take them on a Ferris wheel ride. I said, why not? I said, well, it'll scare them and they'll freak out. And well, we went on the Ferris wheel ride. We had a wonderful time, and God uses those things in our lives to get our attention, to shape us and mold us all the time. He's shaping and molding us, using things we never dreamt could be used. But he continued to chip away at me and make me into the man he wanted me to be. And the verse in Isaiah 64:8, yet you, Lord, are our Father. We are the clay. You are the potter. We are the work of your hand. He never gives up. He's constantly shaping us. In 1986, a friend suggested I volunteer at a ministry that served people with disabilities. And I said, and do what? What am I going to do, cut their hair? I didn't know anything about ministry or nonprofits or any of that. But I liked this guy. He was the chairman of the board, and we had become friends. And so I took his advice, and I went. And I was volunteering there, just doing just anything they wanted done, basically. Move chairs, jump around. But eventually, I was helping them set up their conferences and talk about people. And it was a great time. And after a few years, they offered me a job. And oh my gosh, I don't want to work there. What about getting rich? Can't get rich in ministry. And that's God again. He's never in a hurry. He just keeps plopping those little things down, those little nuggets, and we pick them up. So it was a small ministry then, and I was scared. How am I gonna? My kids were grown and gone. That was nothing to do with kids. But what about me? I like where I live. I like driving a nice car. I like. So that fear and trust thing that I talked about was all over me. And I talked to my wife, and my wife is a very bright lady and very loves Jesus. And I was hoping she would say, no, that's probably not a good idea. She said, well, when did they want you to start? That's not the answer I wanted. I talked to my parents about it. They thought I was crazy. First I was the loser kid, and then I was the businessman, and I was doing okay. Somebody they could talk about. My parents were nice people, but they said, you're crazy. What in the world would you do that for? You're going to give up this for what? What happens if they go upside down? What happens if people don't? All those questions were real in my mind too. Sure. But that little, still small voice that you listen to sometimes, pay attention. that little small voice, even if it doesn't make any sense. Pay attention. So anyway, I went and I worked in that ministry for 24 years. And Matthew 19:21 says, it's paraphrased a little, give away what you have and trust me. And I either sold or gave away all my interests in the businesses I was in. God, what if I said no? What if I said, oh, I don't want to take my money. I liked it. I liked that life. I earned. My evolved over the years, and I found myself flying all over the world, distributing wheelchairs, sharing the gospel. We went to the garden spots, Romania, Guatemala, Russia, all the, but I got to go to Cuba and China. Boy, there's fascinating places. But anyway, there's my ADD. You want to go down that road? I can take you down that road. It was a wonderful time. I spoke in churches. I helped develop programs there, and government leaders in the parliament. And I even had lunch with the president of Ghana once. And I got addicted. I got addicted to the power and the attention. I never had that. This loser, scared kid in school. You're still scared. I'm still scared inside. I worked harder than anybody because I didn't want to be a failure. Here I am. And I'm feeling those old demons just pulling at me, trying to drag me back. And have you ever had Jesus rescue you? You ever been someplace you didn't want to be? Maybe driving down the street in the stolen car. Maybe you didn't get as crazy as I was. Maybe you didn't get the DUI. Maybe they didn't catch you when you stole from where, it just fill in the blank. Jesus did. He rescued me. He didn't let me go too far down that dark road that I was going to gallop down. Unforgettable moment, number 766. My wife mentioned a ministry called Celebrate Recovery was starting in our church. I had been to many men's groups, and they were good, but they never really tackled the hard issues. And when you went there, they didn't go there with you all the time, maybe never. And if you had a problem with anger, they would go along with it. It's your wife's problem. She shouldn't nag you. It's your kids. They shouldn't keep asking you for money. It's the crazy driver in the other car. They didn't address. If you want to hear, my wife and I went, and if you want to hear her story, you're going to have to ask her. But there was Jesus. Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered 12-step program. But they tell you right up front, it won't work unless we're ready to be open and honest and face our hurts, hang-ups, and habits. We need to dig deep and discover why. John, why do you do what you do? I knew what I did, but I didn't know why I did what I did. These are the people I'd been searching for since I was a teenager. What I experienced freed me and taught me things way beyond what I could ever imagine. Step 5 says, I admitted to God, myself, and other human beings the exact nature of my wrongs. First, you got to admit it. First, you got to address it. First, you got to face it. In a few weeks, I found a sponsor, and I went through a step study, and that was very painful but necessary. In a step study, you learn the importance of making amends, making your amends. In step 8, it says, we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all, which is a terrifying but incredibly freeing experience. My first amends were to my wife and kids. And I'll guarantee you that wasn't a one Kleenex box meeting. There were a lot of tears, a lot of sadness, a lot of frustration. But you know something? When I say it's freeing, nobody can go to my wife or my kids and say, did you know your husband did this? Did you know? Did you know? They can't. I know. They know everything I've ever done. They had questions, I answered them. They looked at me cross-eyed. You did what? It's embarrassing. But for me, it was necessary. Over the years, I learned that my sexual integrity issue was a symptom. My big problems I mentioned were fear and trust, which I'm working on. And I've been sober from anger for over 4 years. Anger was the elephant in the room in my house. No one knew when I would blow. Sober is an interesting word. Sober means you're not doing it. Does that mean you're not an addict? No, it doesn't mean you're not an addict, but you're not acting it out. You know when to reel it in. You know when to stop doing something. You know when to stop talking about something. You know when not to look at your iPad. Big, important step in my life. And I understand now how fear infiltrated my life and was at the root of many of my issues. And I believe that I wouldn't be where I am today. My family would not be where they are today without Celebrate Recovery, without facing those hurts, hang-ups, and habits, without addressing them, without accepting them, and having people around you that listen. They don't solve, I tell somebody something, they don't solve my problem. They don't tell me what to do. They ask me why. Well, why'd you do that? Why do you want to do that? Let's start to dig down. I mentioned in the beginning I've been on the potter's wheel for decades. And Jesus has been with me every stage of my life. Every single stage. Even when, as I told you, even when he was just a cuss word. And I'm looking forward to what my next shape is going to be. I don't know, maybe I'll be taller and better looking. You never know. God can do and does amazing things. A kid that allowed me to do. And that's what's there for every single one of us. An interest in you and God to follow you around and God to tell you to stop and tell you to go. You don't have to be. But if you're serious about changing, you must stay wet and on the wheel. That's what I found. And look for those. There was Jesus. Unforgettable moments. There was Jesus. You can look back. And when you look back, you start to build. Start to build that, oh, yeah, there, and there, and there, and there. Makes you strong, makes you more secure in the fact he's going to keep that up. No matter where you're at, you're never too old. I'm living proof. You're never too old to use you. You're never too old to be used by God. If anything I've shared, and you can't do it alone. Don't think you can go in your room and pray this away. That's why he didn't make us islands. He made us the church, his church. We need each other. If anything I've shared has resonated with you, In a minute, Pastor Chris is going to come up and share some things with you that might interest you. Right now, I just like to pray for us.
So that's my dad. We don't, when we look at people, we we just see a snap. I call it snapshots. We just see a snapshot, a snip. Um, we don't get a story. Okay, we don't get a story. When we look back on scripture, it's interesting. You wish you could almost have this same story that, like, my dad is telling, and have Abraham at the end of his life talk about his, or his sons, or Joseph, or Moses. And you go back and you look at their lives, and you look at the trauma of their lives, that somebody wanted Moses, somebody wanted to kill them, and the mothers had to hide them and then deny them. Like, I'll take care of you, but I don't get to have you as my son. And then you pass them off. When you look into that white space between the letters, as I like to use the term, we get a glimpse into these people's lives. And sometimes I think we forget in scripture that these were real people. This wasn't um, this isn't a fantasy book, like I said, where Harry Potter, and then you wonder what the deal is. He's not real, which means all the other stuff doesn't happen, right? But these people are real. When you have um, Abraham and Isaac, and you have a father tying his son up and putting him on an altar and raising a knife to kill him, that's a real event with a real son that afterwards was so traumatized. Real people. I say that because in scripture, in our stories, we get a little backstory, right? We're looking at these people, we're told about them. It's not their story, it's not an autobiography, okay? It's about them. The closest thing we get is Moses, because he has the 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 Torah. He's responsible for the story being told. Okay, so we get a little glimpse more into him than we do some of the other characters. But then we put our books down, and then we go and we talk to people. And you've heard me say, I think we're still in the story. I think the scripture is not over. The story is still being lived out. It's still being told. We're still hearing about it. Okay. And when we look at people, do we see a snapshot? Do we think, how did how did that happen? And when you look at somebody's behavior and you look and you go, and you want to know why, you don't know. Maybe the person wants to share, but's too scared. We don't know. I suggest maybe that we get to know people better. My dad mentioned it wasn't about people preaching at him, it was about people that he lived with. He watched them live their lives. I suggest, possibly, that you find a couple of people, women, a couple of women, men, a couple of men, just a few that you can start to unload. Like I said, one of the bravest men I know is my dad, because he tells you stuff in this that the average person probably has no business knowing. However, If you want to know John Wern and he wants to know you, then for him, sharing that story will help somebody else in their story. So find people that you can share your story with. And like he said, if you're in a position of addiction or you have issues with anger management and a number of things, then there are groups that can help you with that. CR, a brilliant resource. And then we'll have John on here to talk about that. And we'll talk more about that and the impact that it has on his life and um, and how it possibly can impact on your life. So I think we need to remember that there's a story. Look how complex his story is. And if somebody were to give you these little question things and say, okay, plug in these, which one of these are John? There's a good chance you'd have missed a boat. But they're all very real for him. And they're very real for me. So you got a glimpse into my dad, John Wern, and a little glimpse into the formation of me. Interesting. Okay, so a point to ponder as the evening wraps up. It's a quote, it's a poem from Skip Moen. This is dedicated to a friend of mine, very dear friend. Every setback assumes progress. You can't fall back unless you've ventured forth. Step out, fall back, and once more realize the journey is 1,000 inches of detours and directions. Skip Moen, Broken Bits, Poems from the Wasteland. And thanks for being with us tonight on The Dusty Feet.